Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week.
Democratic socialism, Bill Maher says, is like a dating profile. On paper, amazing. Free healthcare, fairness, equality, everything sounds perfect. But then reality shows up. My use is Bernie Sanders as the prime example. Bernie has long pushed single-payer healthcare for a country of 340 million people. But when his own state, Vermont, population just over 600,000, tried something similar, it collapsed under financial pressure. Ma's message is simple. Bold ideas sound great in theory, but execution is where the fantasy meets the bill.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center.
Ma points to real election results. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts that also voted for Trump. And guess what? They were moderates, not democratic socialists. Political autopsies from left-leaning think tanks came to the same conclusion: move to the center. Ma argues this isn't ideology, it's math. If you want to win nationally, you need moderates and independents. Passion from the base isn't enough.
Oh, the kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century.
Ma leans on global contrasts. He references capitalist South Korea and socialist North Korea. One glows bright at night from space. The other is mostly dark. He brings up Venezuela, once wealthier than Poland, which embraced Hugo Chavez-style socialism and saw economic collapse. Meanwhile, Poland moved toward market capitalism and expanded economically. Ma's point isn't subtle. Large-scale socialist experiments have often struggled, and American voters see that.
Richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zoran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoran.
Ma argues many voters think democratic socialism sounds softer than socialism. Add the word democratic, and it feels safer. But critics like him believe the core policies still expand government control and redistribution. Supporters say it's about achieving change through democratic elections, not authoritarian rule. Ma responds, voters don't judge labels, they judge outcomes.
Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor f*** in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet.
Ma acknowledges America already has social safety nets. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, veterans benefits, farm subsidies. He says these programs soften the edges of capitalism. But he draws a line between safety nets and what he sees as more radical expansions proposed by some Democratic Socialists of America members. To him, there's a difference between support systems and systemic overhaul.
I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism. But the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that?
Ma identifies immigration as a key vulnerability. He claims many voters perceived the southern border under President Joe Biden as too loose, and that perception hurt Democrats politically. Whether policy details back that up or not, Ma stresses perception drives elections. If voters believe leadership lacks control, they seek alternatives, even imperfect ones.
It's either defund the police or military in the streets. Either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods. Governor-elect Spanberger once said about Biden's presidency that, quote, nobody elected him to be FDR. They elected him to be normal. Normal! You know, at this year's DSA convention, or as it's commonly known, Comic-Con, get this, you had to submit a photo of a negative COVID test to get in 2025. Yeah, no one wants to do that.
Ma quotes former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan saying voters didn't elect Biden to be FDR, they elected him to be normal. Ma repeats that word, normal. He mocks what he sees as overly sensitive political spaces, arguing average Americans aren't looking for ideological purity or culture war theatrics. They want jobs, safety, manageable inflation, kitchen table issues.
It seems to me that there are two pillars that this country is founded on. One is democracy, and one is capitalism, free markets. And it seems like one party wants to get rid of one, and the other party wants to get rid of the other. Right? The Republicans are not that, democracy is just not number one on their list. It just isn't. It isn't. It's behind Christianity and a few other things. And the Democrats, I mean, I read these 74% are for democratic socialism. Only 16% favor capitalism. Is this going to be a country that I don't recognize in 5 to 10 years if we don't have these two pillars?
Ma says America rests on two pillars, democracy and capitalism. He criticizes Republicans for sometimes undermining democratic norms, while accusing Democrats of drifting away from free market capitalism. He references polling showing rising openness to the word socialism among younger Democrats. For Ma, that's politically dangerous territory in a country historically skeptical of that label.
He is the face of the Democrats on the East Coast, and Katie Porter is the face on the West Coast. I don't know if that's great politically for that party.
Ma takes aim at what he calls woke excess. He argues that pairing ambitious economic restructuring with aggressive cultural progressivism creates an image problem. Fair or unfair, he believes that perception can shrink the party's coalition. In tight elections, small shifts in suburban and independent voters can flip outcomes.
These democratic socialists at another of their conventions, they were told to make jazz hands instead of clapping, lest some delegates suffer sensory overload. And also, and I'm not joking, they were told not to be wearing, any aggressive scents.
Please don't go into that space with anything that's like an aggressive scent, for instance, right? Because that's going to be difficult for people.
Oh, for f***'s sake.
Ma's closing message is strategic, not emotional. He isn't telling Democrats to abandon core values, he's telling them to recalibrate. Drop the ideological swagger. Focus on practical governance. Build a broad coalition. In his view, moderation isn't surrender, it's survival. If Democrats want to win in 2028, he argues, they must sound less like activists on Twitter and more like neighbors at the dinner table.